going to show you how to make a ring and bracelet set. This is just a wire wrapped set, a very simple wire wrapped ring and a pretty simple wire wrapped bracelet that turns out very nice. Looks like very nice high-end jewelry. Turns out beautiful. Let me take this off so you can look at it. This is made with 18 gauge wire. I also made another one. These are moonstone glass type beads, simulated moonstone, really pretty. And they turn out really nice. I made these in 18 gauge wire. However, you can also do it in 20 gauge wire. These were my originals that I had made because I wanted to use up some of my gemstones and be able to wear and enjoy my gemstones. So I made one in lapis and sodalite and turquoise. However, the 20 gauge is just not quite as substantial. It bends a lot as you're wearing it. It gets misshapen. With the 18 gauge, that doesn't happen. It feels more substantial. It keeps its shape and it looks really pretty. It just feels better. So I have done it in 18 gauge today on the video. However, you can do 20 gauge. It's easier to wrap. And it looks nice. It's just not quite as durable as the 18 gauge. So I use 18 gauge in the bracelets and 20 gauge in the ring. We're going to start with the bracelet. I'll show you what you need and show you how to do the bracelet. And then we'll do the ring. I'll show you what you need and then show you how to do the ring. Let's get started. For this bracelet, I am using about 12 8mm round beads. Now I say about 12 because it's depending upon the length you want to make. Now some of my bracelets I've made with 11, some of them I've made with 12. If you want to make even a bigger bracelet than I'm making, you may use 13 or 14, or if you want to make smaller, you may use 10 or 11. It just depends on the length of bracelet you want to make and how tightly you wrap it and your loop size, so on and so forth. But approximately 12 will get you where you need to go. This is an 8mm round moonstone type glass bead. It's a simulated, and it's really a pretty bead. You can use any bead that you would like to use that's 8mm round. You may even get away with 6mm round, but of course you'll have to have more beads and do more wraps to achieve your length. I'm using an 8/0 seed bead. This is a Toho. Now some 8/0s fit really well over this particular gauge of wire we're going to be using, and some of them do not. I'm using a Toho. It is the galvanized aluminum permanent finish, and some of them slide over very easily and some of them I have to pick and choose. But a Toho 8/0 is your best bet. If you'd like to, you can use a 6/0. Again, it's going to affect your length, but it'll go over the wire easier. I'm using 18 gauge wire. I'm using 2 pieces. I've cut 2. This one is 24 inches, so 2 feet in one length, and then 12 inches or 1 foot in the second length. The wire I'm using is a craft wire that I got at Hobby Lobby, and it's silver tone, and it's a little bit closer to medium temper. It's not really soft, but 18 gauge regardless is nice and hefty wire that you can make this bracelet with. I have used 20 gauge also. This design works really well in 20 gauge. However, the bracelet isn't quite as hefty and firm and keeps a shape as well. So I'm using 18 gauge because I like the end result. I will be using some coiling pliers, and I'll be using this section of it. This is basically the same size as a pencil, so if you want to make your first loop for your clasping with a pencil, you can do that too if you do not have one of these. I'm going to use a round nose plier. I'm going to use chain nose plier. I'm going to use flat nose pliers, and having some nylon nose pliers helps too, and of course you need a flush cutter. A ruler may help too. So let's go ahead and get started with this the first step of this project. We're going to begin with the piece that you cut at 24 inches. And you can just run your nail on nose pliers over it. If you don't have any, use your fingers or a wire straightener or something to just kind of straighten it out so that there's not any kinks in it. And then we're going to put both of these ends together. And just try to get them as close together as you can, and then just run your fingers up, pushing the two wires next to each other until you can find your center pretty well. Don't kink it and don't push your center completely together because you want to retain a loop to make a loop. So I am then going to use this part of my coiling pliers. You can use a pencil, like I said, and I'm just going to place my wire over this one that I have chosen, and I'm just going to kind of squeeze it around and just pinch the two sides of the wire together. And you can use your pliers if you'd like. My fingernails seem to work okay doing this, so I just use them. But you can, of course, use your pliers if you'd like. All we're doing is drawing the two ends together. Now I did not get a perfectly round, so I'm just going to kind of doctor it up. 18 gauge is a little harder to get it perfectly round, but that's okay. Just get it nice and neat, as neat as you can, and draw these two sides together as much as you can. If you'd like, you can kind of use your pliers to bring them together like this. Now, like I said, it's not a perfect loop, but it's pretty good. Now I'm going to grab my 12-inch piece of wire, and I'm going to place it on top of this loop right here. And I'm going to go about an inch on this side. I'm going to have about an inch left over. And then I'm going to bring the short end around. Now, starting this is kind of hard, so just be patient and make a loop around your wire like this. And then bring your wire around and coil it. I'm going to use my chain nose pliers because this is 18 gauge wire and it's kind of stiff. So I'm going to coil my wire up towards my loop with the short end of the wire that I put across my loop. And I'm just going to close the neck of that loop. Now, you want to make sure your wires stay side by side, so if they get kind of on top of each other, just squeeze them down with your pliers. And then I'm going to cut this little tail off. Real close to my coil and squeeze it down a little. But before I squeeze it down a lot, I'm going to move my coil up the neck as close as I can, and then just kind of squish my coils together, especially if your coils are far apart. Mine are not too far apart, so I don't have to doctor it up too much. And this is what you should have. Now, you can, if you'd like, go ahead and bring the long wire around again if you need to. But I don't think I need to, and I'm talking about this point. You can go around it one more time if you feel like you need another loop. I'm just going to leave mine like this. Now you can see my long wire is on the top here, right here, and where it stops making contact is right between these two wires here. So what I mean by stops making contact, I mean with the coil, this part. And I'm just going to bring it straight down in between the two wires that I've coiled together. and I'm just going to push it down between those two, just like this. Make sure you don't kink that middle wire because that's the one you need to slide your beads on, and your beads will not slide on well. Now let me zoom out so you can see what I've got. This is what I have. They should all be basically the same length. Your middle one might be a little longer, and that's okay. Now I'm going to move some stuff here. I'm going to find an 8/0 seed bead that will fit over my wire well, and I'm going to slide it down my middle wire. And then I'm going to put on one of my round beads, my 8mm beads, slide it down, and then I'm going to put on another 8/0 and bring it down. Now I'm going to have the loop towards me, and I'm just going to push this down to where my 8/0 is just right where this wire starts to bend, right here, just like that. Now let me zoom out. I will zoom in and out as you need to see, but with wires I need to kind of be out so I'm in frame. So now I've got my bead positioned where I want it, my 3 beads. I'm going to take my right wire and I'm going to bring it behind the middle wire. And I'm going to bend it just over that 8/0 seed bead. Let's get close again. Whoops, not that way. So you can see. I'll bring my camera out just a little bit. Come on, camera. And I'm going to move this wire over the top of the left-hand wire. So I've gone underneath the middle wire. I'm just going to make sure it's over the top of the left-hand wire so that I can manipulate it okay. And then I'm going to bring it over the top of the middle wire and up. So as I'm bringing it over, I'm just moving it at an angle, kind of diagonal. And tightly. I want to make sure it's nice and tight, and get you close, and you can see I'm leaving, because I'm moving it up, I'm leaving a tiny gap between the 8/0 and the wire I've just bent. Now I'm going to take my left-hand wire and I'm going to bring it over the top. Instead of going underneath the middle wire, I'm going to bring it over the top of the middle wire, and right between where my right-hand wire and my 8/0 seed bead are. So I'm going over the top and in between the wire and the 8/0, and then behind the middle wire, just like that. Now I'm going to straighten my little piece up, make sure that my link looks good, make sure it's tight, just by manipulating your wire a little bit. And this is what it should look like, just like that. Now I am going to put onto my middle wire again an 8/0 seed bead, and an 8mm round bead, and an 8/0 seed bead, and bring it down. As I bring this down with my 3 beads, I will just gently push against the first coil I made, just gently, not real hard, just to kind of tighten that middle coil and keep everything together well. Now I'm holding on to this middle bead. I've got my right hand wire, and I'm going to bring it up against the bead and bend it back behind the middle wire. Do this slowly and gently so that you can get a nice curve in your wire. And then bring it over the top of the wire, so bring it around over the top at an angle so that you have a slight space between the 8/0 and the wire. And then take your left wire and bring it over the side of the bead, over the top of the middle wire, between your previous wire and the 8/0 seed bead, right here. And then bring it back behind the middle wire. Straighten everything out. And tighten your wraps a little, just by kind of turning it and twisting it and manipulating your wire gently, like this. Now you can see my wraps are not really tight and close together, so this one's going to have a little bit more length, and I'll probably use 11 beads. Now, if you have it real close up here, you don't have as much length, then you'll just have to measure after you get several beads on how long your bracelet is going to be and judge how many beads to put on. And I'll give you a little bit more guidance on that. But now we are going to put on one more. So I'm going to pick up an 8/0 seed bead, slide it down, and then I'm going to put on my big bead, and then another 8/0 seed bead, and slide it down, just like that. Now I'm going to stay kind of zoomed out so you can see the process here. I'm going to hold on to this bigger bead, and I'm going to bring my wire up, my right hand wire up and behind that middle wire, and then around the front of it and up at an angle, just like that. And then I'm going to bring my left wire around the bead, over the top of the middle wire, between my previous wrap and my 8/0 seed bead, and then behind it, and you can kind of pull it down. So this one, as you're going around, you're going up. As you're bringing this one around behind the middle wire, you go down. So you have a slight upward angle on this one and a slight downward angle on this one. And then again, straighten out your piece. And that's what that should look like. Let me get you close so you can see what the units look like. And go ahead and continue wrapping until you have the length that you desire. So I have gone to 7 inches. I want my bracelet to be over 7 inches because, of course, bangles, you want them a little bit looser so that they move on your wrist. And you need to retain some length for your clasping end over here. So let me show you what I've got. I'm placing mine just halfway through this loop here on my first mark on my ruler. And my first mark is kind of going away because I use it so much, but right there. And you can see that my last bead has come to about the 7-inch mark. And what I've done is on my last bead, I've stopped. I've put on an 8/0 seed bead, my 8mm round, but no the 8/0 seed bead on this side, and I haven't wrapped anything. I completed this wrap. This wrap is my last one, so I'm leaving it open like this. Now this is what it should look like. You will have a lot more wire on your middle wire left than you will on the sides. So like I said, if you're going to make a longer bracelet, you may want to have you may want to put a couple more inches on your initial longer piece. Your 24-inch piece, you might want to make it 26. And this is how it should look. Now we are going to work on the hook end of our clasp. So we need our wire cutters. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to lay this down flat so you can see my my loop on this side. I'm going to manipulate it until it's laying kind of flat, kind of manipulate my bracelet till it's laying somewhat flat against my bead pad. That lets you know what angle your clasping should be at. And then I'm going to take this long wire and I am going to go probably about 1 inch up right here. Let me measure it for you. Probably is probably not a good thing to tell you. Yeah, I'm going to go right at 1 inch, and where the inch mark is, I'm going to the inside of it with my wire and my pliers. Now let me get that out of the way. And all I'm going to do is bring this wire and bend it over like this. So what I've done is I've just bent it over my flat nose pliers so that it is a loop that's flat against my bead pad. So it's the right angle for the other end that we just manipulated. Now, you're going to take this little band, kind of squeeze it together, make sure it's nice and neat. Get your flush cutters and cut right at the top of the bead here. Let me cut it this way so it's flush cut. So you want that to lay really close to the bead. I cut mine a little bit short, but that's okay. I can squeeze this together a little bit more, manipulate it a little more, so that this wire is right on top of that bead. And I'm going to get you close so you can see what I'm talking about. I twisted a little bit, that's okay. I want that to lay flush against that bead so that it stays well inside my wrap. Now it wants to mess with me, so I'm just going to manipulate it until I can get it to be where I want it to be. Squeeze this together just a little more up here. And the issue that I'm having is my bead is sliding around, so try to hold on to your bead so that you know exactly what your length is. This is close enough. It's better if it touches the bead, but this is pretty good. Now I'm going to take my right wire, like I have been, and I'm going to bring it right around the top of the bead, just like I have been doing. Now at a little angle slightly up, and then I'm going to take my left wire and do the same thing I've been doing right between the bead and the previous wrap, just like this. And now I can just wrap these two around and secure my clasping. I want to make sure this stays the way I want it to, so you can manipulate that too. I'm going to use my chain nose pliers so I get a nice tight wrap. I'm going to start with this wire and just bring it around so that it's right next to this wire, and I'm going to bring them both around. And this can be a little tough. It takes a little bit of strength. So I've got that one. I've got them both on top. Now I'm moving this one out, and you'll see as you're doing it. And I'm going to just wrap around the front like that so it's nice and tight. And then I'll take this one and just go around one more time around my bead. So that I have a nice like bead cap top. And you can wrap it however you want. I mean, just as long as you have it secure, that's the important thing. And I think I'll cut mine right there since it wants to bend. So I'm just going to cut this here. And then I'll take my chain nubs. I hope I'm in frame. Let me back off just a little. And I will manipulate this wire in and tuck it in the best I can. Yeah, there we go. Now that looks pretty good. And then this top one, I am going to cut off. Flush cut it real close and tuck it in, just so that it's nice and smooth and doesn't poke anybody. And to back off so you can see what I've got, this is what you should have. Now I'm going to just manipulate this a little bit more so that it lays a little straighter, and this a little bit better, and this is what I have. Now I'm just going to start making this into a bracelet. I'm going to just start bending it. If you have a bracelet mandrel, it's going to help tremendously. But before I bend that completely into a bracelet, I actually should have done this first. We're going to end this little hook here. Sorry about that. I was all ready to be done. So what we need to do with this loop now, you're going to make sure that, I'm going to flatten this back out, sorry guys. You're going to make sure that this end is laying flat against the bead mat, and so is this end. And then you're just going to take your chain nose pliers, and I'm going to turn it, let's see, I'm going to bend this little tip down just a little bit to the bead mat, like that. And then I'm going to take my flat nose pliers and I'm going to go more towards the fat end of my plier, and I'm just going to bend towards me now. Just like that. Hope that wasn't too confusing. But now I have a hook. And as you lay it down, the hook is up towards the ceiling, and this one is, of course, still flat. That way, when I bring my bracelet around into a loop, my hook is positioned correctly. So now that I have my hook, and you can adjust the size of your hook too, make it a little bit skinnier, a little bit fatter, whatever you'd like. And now I'm going to start to make my bracelet. And you can use a bracelet mandrel to help you too. I have one, it's an oval shape, but if you want yours very round, just use something round. I'm going to hook this. And then I'm going to grab my bracelet mandrel, and I'm just going to gently slide this on here. And you can use anything round, or you can just keep using your fingers. And I'm just going to push this gently down until I get it as far as it'll go with a little bit of tension, and that'll help me shape my bracelet. And of course, you can just keep using your fingers and getting it shaped the way you'd like. I'm going to push that clasp down a little bit, and then I'm going to open it. I think I need to bend this just a little bit so that it clasps a little better. Yeah. So I brought this end down just a little bit, and you'll see what you need to do to get it to clasp nicely. And then I can slide this on my wrist, push it down over the hook, turn it, and you can shape it on your wrist a little bit more too. And that's what that looks like. Now this is probably about a 7.5 inch bracelet. And it doesn't have a, well, yeah, it has pretty good movement. Could be 7.5, 7 3/4, something like that. And this works really well for me. You'll have to use a little bit of your own ingenuity to figure out exactly the length you want, how many beads you want to put on it. You can make it exactly like I just did, but if your wraps are even a little bit different, you might come up with just a slightly different length, just so you know. And that's how you make that bracelet. Okay, so let's make a ring that matches our bracelet that we just made. Now, I'm using the same brand of wire that I did in my bracelet, but I'm using 20 gauge this time instead of 18 gauge. I've cut 14 inches of it, and then you will just lightly straighten it out. Just make sure it's not real kinked with your nail-on nose pliers. I'm using my 8mm round bead that matches the bracelet, and then I'm going to use a ring mandrel. Now, my ring mandrel doesn't have sizing on it, so what I've done is I've chosen a ring that fits me well on the finger that I want to wear it, and I've just slid it on, and I have marked it below the ring right here. And I'll just go slightly below that mark when I make my ring, because you do get some shrinkage. So I'll just use that as kind of a guide to where I'll put my wire on my ring mandrel. Or you can just use something round that's basically the size that you want to make your ring. You don't have to have a mandrel, but it certainly helps. Then I'm going to take my piece of wire, and I'm going to put the two ends together and just kind of find my center here. And don't kink it, don't bend a real steep bend here or your bead won't slide over. Put your bead on and bring it down to the center area, just like this. And then just bring the wires down on both sides of the ring, or of the bead, excuse me, like this. And then grab your flat nose pliers. Let me get you closer so you can see what I've got. Now I'm going to grab my flat nose pliers right at the edge of the bead here. So I mean the outside part of the bead here. I'm just going to place my pliers right there and just bend my wire over on one side and then straighten it out a little. And then I'm going to do the same thing on this side. So this is what I've got. Then I'm going to grab my ring mandrel and I'm going to place it just below my mark a little bit. Trying to place my bends down towards the mandrel, just like this. And then I am going to bring one wire over the top of the bead like this and around. Don't cross your wires if at all possible. And bring this one around. And then I'm going to pull my wire tight with my pliers here, like this, and get you a little closer. And just try to retain as much control as you can on the bead, like this. And then I'm going to start wrapping one of my wires around. Until I retain about an inch on the side. And then I'm going to do the other side. And I'll pull this wire tight, and then I'll pull this wire tight. I think I can make one more wrap with this one, retaining enough so that I can wrap it around the sides of my band, just like this. And then I'm going to look at where it's at, and I've slid quite a bit beneath my mark here, but that's okay. So just watch that you don't slide way down your mandrel. It's okay because it'll fit me on one of my fingers, so I'm not too worried about it. Now I've taken it off the mandrel, and I'm going to bring one of these sides around the band. And wrap it. So just do it slowly and gently, bringing it up around the band area, and then wrap it, and then do the other side. And I'm going to go back and wrap that one more, but I just want to get both of them established. So I'm bringing my wire around, and with my flat nose I'm just kind of guiding it tightly around that band, trying not to cross my wires too much or do anything weird to my band. It just takes a little practice, and you can do this a million different ways. You can wrap them all differently. You can make as many wraps around the sides as you'd like. You can use 3 wraps around the mandrel to give you a thicker ring band. There's so many modifications. Just try it a couple of times and figure out what you like. I'm going to bring this around to where the wire end is towards the top of the ring so that I can tuck it in towards the top, and the pokey part will not poke my hand. Then I'm going to go over to this side and finish my wrap here. And see, with this one, I kind of wrapped it over to the side, so I get a little bit different look. Each one I make, I get kind of a different look. And I like that. That's okay. See if I'm crossing my bands a little bit. Continue here. And I'm just going to clip that off. A lot of times when I wrap it, I'll get the two bands kind of crossed, but it's not that big of a deal. If you don't want them to cross, you're just going to have to practice until you can figure out a way to wrap it without crossing them. I'm tucking in my little tails, adjusting the wire the way I want it to look, and then I'm going to put it back on the mandrel. And see, I'm actually a little bit above my mark, even though it looked like I slid down and made it really big. So I'm good. And see, this is what I mean about my bands crossing, but that's okay. And then because my bands cross, I'm just going to lightly tap this to strengthen it, but not real hard because my bands are crossed. And this is what it looks like. I'm not too picky with it, but you can get as picky as you'd like. You can make them as perfect or as imperfect as you'd like. And I think that's pretty, turned out nice, looks good, so I'm happy with it. The fact that my band is crossed, it's fine. I'd rather it wasn't, but it's fine. And it goes really well with my bracelet. So let me back off and I'll put my bracelet on. Perhaps. Perhaps I'll put it on. There we go. And there's a little ring and bracelet set. I think it's quite cute. Turn that one around. And I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. See you later.